Thanks for tuning into the Texas Scratch King channel. In this Bad Bitch Tuesday edition. In this video you will hear about Basilia, a one-time winner. And Grand Champion Tina. Let us start with Basilia. Artero and Go Team's Basilia. This is the story of a little bulldog with the heart of a lion. A bulldog that never backed down and gave her all. Her name was Artero and Go Team's Basilia. Basilia was out of a breeding between the Ecuadorian legend G.O.'s Grand Champion Crota and William T. Kennel's ACDC. Obviously I don't need to go into details about Grand Champion Crota. His story is already in the history books. Basilea's dam. ACDC was sired by Southern Kennels, Clyde, a dog double-bred on Southern Kennels Grand Champion Mayday ROM, and out of Southern Kennels Vodka, sired by the two-time winner Hell on Earth's Zeke. And out of Trowery's Nitrous, making her heavily linebred on Chaviz's Champion Yellow John ROM. Basilia was always a pleasure to be around. She never was the noisy or flashy type of bulldog. But she was self-confident and well-balanced. A class act and an elite bulldog without a doubt. Basilia was tested really hard, in fact she was 3-dogged. And she passed it with flying colors. So it was time to move up to the big league. So she was hooked into SP Kennels from Brazil for those owners of good dogs such as Champion Matraca. We would have to travel a long way. But we had the confidence to accomplish this. 2 days before the show I went to pick her up and I realized that Basilia was not in top condition. As a matter of fact she was all dehydrated. And underweight due to human errors. All I could do was to administer some IV fluids before the trip. Basilia traveled as cargo, so she had to stay in the airport and wait until all the paperwork was completed in order to release her from customs. When we finally got her out she was all skin and bones. We tried to recover her doing everything in our power. Here I have to mention FLA gentlemen in the sport who supported us in every way possible. The moment of truth came and my little Basilia came half a pound under and we stepped inside the box. SP Kennel's dog was in perfect and top condition. They met in the middle of the with Bossy trying her opponent out, but she was strong and had a very hard mouth. So she punished Basilia and gave her a bad bleeder in her muzzle. Basilia, always confident of herself, was trying to do all in her power to prevail, and SP's dog started to realize that Bossy is a real bulldog. Saco de Hiesos, as she was known there. She did all in her power to overcome all the odds against her and finally won in 135 in an impressive manner. The aftercare of Basilia was such an ordeal. All this made a big toll inside her. She stayed with us fighting for her life 3 weeks after this. But her internal organs could not withstand what she went through. She is not longer with us and of course she left a big hole in our hearts, but will always be remembered as a bulldog. Story 2 East Block's Grand Champion Tina Best in Show. December 2004 would always remain a landmark in Philippine pit bull history, as it was perhaps the first and hopefully not the last time when the two major gaming clubs went head-to-head and pitted the best of their best at that time. I have no intimate knowledge as to how this historic event called Bakbak in 2004 came to be. Nor was I one of the fortunate to have one of my dogs on the night's fight card. But I was there to witness firsthand why the soon-to-be legends like Grand Champion DGK's Timoy was well worthy to be remembered. Honestly, I attended primarily to watch the litter mate of my dog, who had just lost on the same month, go against one of much-touted offspring of Champion Arce's Whiskey ROM. So on the morning of the said event, I was dozing drunk in the pool of a nearby residence that once belonged to a fellow dogman, who is now no longer in the game, with some of his group mates. Since not much among their number felt like drinking before the fight, I consumed a whole bottle of brandy by myself plus a few beers and went staggering to the venue that afternoon with one of the breeders I tipped my hat to. En route, we met and hobnobbed with our brothers in the sport, though I was half drunk to remember most of them. But I remember clear as day who I saw and nodded hello to when was hobbling back to our camp after taking a looky-loo at Discs Andy, a 1XW. Who was slated to go against MTK's Bruno, a 2XW. Noel EBK sat on a mat, clad in his classic Let's Rock t-shirt and his matching bonnet. Dangling from his lips was a cigarette and wrapped in his arms was a well-toned red and white bitch who stared seemingly without a care at the festivities before them. Tina, I mumbled to myself. Tina was out of HTK's Foundation Stud Gator, a 2XW, and HTK's Nobane. Daughter of Samia's Bic Rude and HTK's Scudsonori de Bitch Tizy. Tina had first gained notoriety when she went against Southernman's Vivian and made short work of her. Tina was eventually to become the Philippines' first grand champion. Yet at that time, whoever saw her fight would never doubt she was destined to make history. Especially in the capable hands of one of the greatest dogmen to ever spring out of this hellhole we call a country. I was never really friends with the man. However, I had met him years before on YGK's camp when Tabas went against STD's Kathia 1XW. This was when he and YGK, who was sort of my mentor when I began in the game, were still chums and the crap that went flying around the now defunct Rajabito message boards was still in the nearby future. It was EBK's aftercare know-how that saved Tabas that day after a hard-fought match that lasted almost 2 hours where neither Tabas nor Kathy was willing to give up an inch. After that, we only said hellos whenever we came across each other during PDC conventions then held quarterly. That day was no different. I gave him a nod and said, "Sir," and he nodded back, "Mista." I saw him next after that when I found myself seated near the pit. Sandwiched between Serge, owner of soon-to-be champion Elvis, and an old man we affectionately addressed as Dad. Tina was going up against an Arce-bred Carver dog called Lucy. There had been much pre-fight talk on the boards and only God knows where else. But on that night, on the very instant the dogs were released from their corner, there seemed to fall a prevalent hush, before the night again erupted into cheers and taunts. At first I gave the match little regard as in between the brandy and the extra bottles of beer I had bummed from friends around me. Was busy praying to the pit bull saints Earl Tudor and Don Mayfield to bless my dog's litter mate as she was to fight last that night. Then from where I sat, I heard a crisp crunch and a whimper. I looked up and saw Tina with Lucy's front end between her steel-like teeth. Lucy was in trouble. Her handler was busy cheering her on, trying to urge the bitch to hang on. EBK stood and circled around the pit almost wordlessly, cigarette in hand and looking cool as a cucumber while Tina shook the life out of Lucy. It was then I remembered some of what had been said in the GP message boards. Tina. Sinasundo ka na ni Lucifer. I scanned the faces of the crowd and tried to imagine which of those bozos said that and what must he be thinking now. Cyber Dogman is always something we could always live without. Tina continued to methodically demolish Lucy a little past the half-hour mark. From where I was sitting, it looked as if Tina barely had a mark on her. Looking back, how I wish stayed a little sober so that I may pay attention to details years after as I'm writing this now while I try to brush aside the cobwebs of time. What I do remember was the faraway look on Lucy's eyes when she refused to scratch back and continue the fight, while Tina waited in her corner seething with silent rage. And man, how I remember thinking how I wished someday I'd have me a dog who fought like the devil. Thanks again for listening to the Texas Scratch King channel. Please don't forget to subscribe, like and share the video and hit the notification icon, so you know when a new one drops. Until the next time my friends, as we always say, never submit to life and keep scratching every time.